Hi guys, my name is Stephanie Schwartz and I'm going to be presenting on Chapter 14, which is Communications in the Promotional Mix, and that answers the question, how do we get there? So the question I chose for this chapter is question number 3. It says, this chapter emphasizes the importance of keeping promotional messages simple. Review hospitality and travel promotions either at the local or national level. Find and describe at least 5 examples of promotions that use simple communications, and 5 examples of ones you feel are overly complicated. How could each of the latter messages be improved to communicate more effectively? So I'm going to start with promotions and communications, and more specifically the elements of the promotional techniques known as the promotional mix. The promotional mix is the element of the marketing mix that focuses on advertising, personal selling, merchandising, sales promotions, public relations, and publicity. All of these work alongside each other as well as the rest of the marketing mix to promote services and communicate messages to customers. With advertising, promotions come in the form of an announcement or persuasive message that is portrayed through media. They can be similar to publicity, but the defining characteristic is that they are a paid endorsement by the company themselves rather than a third party. Advertising is usually aimed at making a sale, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the goal is just to portray a positive image of the organization. The next element is personal selling. This is going to be a face-to-face or over-the-phone conversation between a salesperson and a prospective customer. So in this situation, you're going to have a small window where you have an opportunity to close a sale. So the sales presentation needs to be highly tailored to the individual needs of the customer in order to keep the customer's attention. And so people tend to be pretty defensive when it comes to personal selling, so this is where the communication tactics come into play. Then we have merchandising, which is going to be in-house displays, signage, and physical products available for purchase. The major benefit of this tactic is the visual reminder that supports a company's promotional campaign. So maybe a customer has already been exposed to the campaign and advertisements, and now they're seeing it in the store. Let's see here. So sales promotion is our next element. Basically, these are just short-term opportunities that are meant to prompt a customer to buy immediately. Some examples of these would be coupons, contests, and other temporary discounts. Then lastly, we have public relations and publicity, which are similar to advertisements, but it's a third-party organization other than the company that is being advertised. So this is going to be ads in magazines where you have a publicist that's writing an article giving either positive or negative feedback on the company. These messages are normally seen in a positive way by customers because they're not seen as an advertisement being shoved down their throat. They're seeing it as more credible because it's a third party and less biased. So those are the elements of the promotional mix, and they're essential to conveying the message itself, which brings us to the communication process. So this process is a part of every promotional activity. Every advertisement, merchandising decision, and sales promotion is going to make its way through the 9-step process of communications, during which time the customer is either going to hopefully receive the message or not receive it. So it's a very important process. The first element in this 9-step chain is the source, which is the person or organization who is attempting to transmit information to customers. Then we're going to have the step of encoding, which is the art of translating the information into an arrangement that's going to send a message. This involves using words, pictures, colors, sounds, movements, and body language. All of this must work together in order to effectively portray a message. And then we have the message itself. So this is what the source wants to communicate through their efforts and hopes that they're effective in doing, which is not always the case, as we know. Then we have the medium, which is the communication channel that the message is going to pass through. That's going to be media, internet, newspaper, even face-to-face sales pitches fall under this category. A sales pitch would be an example of a more personal channel of communication, whereas media is more impersonal. So each has its own place in promotional activities. Next, we have the very important step of decoding. So this is when we not only come in contact with the message, but the customer is going to take the time to interpret that message in a way that's meaningful. So we have a source who has encoded a message through use of a medium, but now is when we find out if that message has even reached home and not gone in one ear and out the other, as my photo suggests. So decoding is not something that we as customers even do every time. Sometimes we see a message, we're aware of it, yet we don't even take the time to interpret it because it hasn't caught our attention in a way that motivates us to do so. We talked a lot about this in chapter 4 when we talked about perception and the way that customers form cognitive impressions of promotions. This included the 4 perceptual processes, perceptual screens and filters, perceptual biases, selective retention, and closure. So these 4 processes are filtered through, these 4 processes are the ones that are filtered through every time we're getting a message. And in creating promotional content, marketing managers really need to be aware of the way that customers process information because they want to be able to navigate around these perception barriers. As I mentioned earlier, good publicity and public relations is a really good tactic to make its way around these barriers and help them not get filtered out along the way. So as I answer the chapter question, I'm going to be using perceptual processes as a way to kind of gauge how effective or ineffective these promotions are in getting past the 4 perceptual barriers. So just to wrap up the communication process, we have noise, which is basically any content that is competing for a customer's attention and getting in the way of their attention to the ad itself, the promotional message that they are supposed to be receiving. And then we have the receiver, and these are those who actually notice the source's message through all the noise. And then we have response, which is a win in itself for promotional messages. This is when a promotion gets noticed and holds the attention of a person long enough where they're actually going to respond to the message either by calling the number on the promotion, going to the website, or just making a mental note of it. Then finally we have feedback, which is when the receiver goes as far as to communicate back to the original source. This is when we find out if the message was interpreted in the way that it was meant to be interpreted. And hopefully this is when we're going to make a sale of some kind. So that wraps up the communication process. It's a lengthy process on paper, but what's so intriguing about it is that this whole entire process can take place in a split second. You can have an encoded message that is put out there, decoded, responded to, and generating feedback all in the blink of an eye. A make or break moment can happen that fast for a company, which is why it's so important for marketing managers to have insight on their target markets and to know what they're going to pay attention to and how to get them to respond in a positive way. So that brings me to my chapter question, which emphasizes keeping it simple. So we've all heard of this acronym, or at least most of us have, KISS, K-I-S-S. It's Keep It Simple, Stupid. So this is a design principle that was noted by the Navy in the 1960s, and it simply states that most systems work best if they are kept simple rather than made complicated. Therefore, simplicity should be a key goal in design, and unnecessary complexity should be avoided. So this is a principle that was not necessarily meant for marketing, but I think it's definitely applicable here, and I think it reflects what our book says about keeping it simple as well. I also found an article online by Business to Community, which also reinforces this idea about keeping communication simple. This article had 3 main points that kind of act as a guide for marketing managers in ways for them to be able to keep their promotional content simple. So the first one was simplicity rules. This is just about breaking down your message into digestible bits that can be absorbed little by little. Rather than including as much information as possible, simplify it so that it's easily understood and might therefore be impactful. The second is edit with a chainsaw. Basically, this just means cutting out every excessive bit and aiming for clarity above all else. It's not about trying to be wordy and clever, but just being clear and simple. And then number 3 is differentiate. This emphasizes being able to alter your message based on the needs of each specific market. So this involves shifting your message when necessary to better meet your audience and meet them where they're at and for what's important to them. So these three concepts again support what our book suggests about simplicity and the effectiveness of simple communication. So now I've kind of laid the groundwork for the promotional mix and the communication process. We know about advertising, personal selling, merchandising, sales promotion, publicity, and public relations, and how these promotional activities are used to communicate messages. So now I just want to look at some examples of hospitality and travel promotions, their level of simplicity or complexity in each of these, and the ways that each of these could be improved to better communicate. So I will start with some examples of promotions that I feel use simple communications. So the first ad that I chose to examine is an ad for ArizonaGuide.com, which this is a really vibrant picture of a guy jumping off a cliff and reads, "Your journey starts here. It starts with a leap. Let yourself go." I like this ad because it is very simple. It's a simple photo and some caption to go along with it. It's pretty much all it is. It definitely touches on Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the way of self-actualization, which is all about self-discovery and the exploration and evaluation of self. The colors are also very vibrant, which captures my attention, unlike a lot of other ads. The one thing I would say, this ad doesn't necessarily tell you where the photo was taken. It might catch my attention, but if I'm drawn in by the photo itself and the location and the experience that this person is having, I might want to know exactly where they are, not just the general area. So I might have added maybe the name of the exact location at the bottom of the page. And other than that, I feel like it's a really effective ad. The next ad over is an ad for visitmontana.com, which is this beautiful scenic display of mountain and lake. And we have a caption here that reads, "There's nothing here, nothing but a landscape so big and wide and rugged that it stretches your soul. Nothing but the corner store where the sign reads, 'If we don't have it, you don't need it.' And nothing but a million stars overhead to remind you that no one should settle for a hotel with a mere 5. All this nothing leaves more room for the unexpected to happen. Montana, you just never know." And it ends with visitmontana.com. So this ad is definitely seeking out a niche traveler. It emphasizes adventure and the unknown, doing things differently rather than settling for a 5-star hotel. It emphasizes the physiological need of escape, and I would even say that it touches on esteem, being that the ad's message is that traveling this way is maybe better than staying in a nice hotel. And the one thing I think this ad could have done to take it a step further would be adding that element of self-actualization. It could have made it a bit more personal by adding something about satisfying one's inner desires, because I do think this ad is aimed at someone who's seeking out more and who is maybe on that journey of self-discovery. The next promotion I chose is an ad for TravelAlphas.com, and it's for New York City and reads, "The top 10 underrated things to do in New York City." I like what this ad is saying because I think a lot of people do seek out a more unique experience, especially when you're headed somewhere like New York, where you think of those top attractions, like Eiffel Tower and all of those things that are the normal tourist things. This is about seeking out something that's different. So I do like what it's saying. However, I'm not sure the photo itself is right for this ad. Just as far as perceptual screens, this looks a lot like something that I'm used to seeing when I think of New York. This is a pretty general picture, so the ad doesn't really stand out to me, and in which case might not make it past that first perceptual screen that I have. Research shows that we are more likely to notice and retain things that stand out from the norm, so this ad doesn't really do that for me. I would probably suggest using a photo that portrays a more unique side of New York, probably something like one of the activities they're suggesting, something that looks different from the New York we're used to seeing. So the next promotion I have is an ad for the Hanalei Colony Resort. It's a pretty standard photo of Hawaiian snorkeling, which again we're pretty used to seeing as far as ads for Hawaii. It goes on to describe this beautiful scene on the north shore of Kauai and a resort